The Mirror of Misunderstanding. Imagine walking into a conversation thinking it's an opportunity to exchange ideas, only to find yourself trapped in a maze of twisted logic, misplaced confidence, and emotional resistance. You try to offer clarity, but every effort is met with deflection or even mockery. It feels like shouting into a void where reason is swallowed whole and truth is irrelevant. This is not a rare experience. It happens more often than we'd like to admit, and each time it leaves a mark subtle but deeply frustrating. What makes these encounters so draining is not just the irrationality of others, but our own expectations. We assume that logic should prevail, that evidence should speak for itself, that intelligent arguments should be met with curiosity. But in the real world, this assumption often collapses. Because sometimes you are not speaking to understand or be understood, you're speaking to a wall that believes it's a mirror. The other person doesn't want insight. They want validation. They don't seek truth. They seek to defend their ego at all costs. And that's the first truth you must understand. Fools aren't defined by a lack of intelligence. They're defined by the refusal to question themselves. They live in a psychological fortress, built not from knowledge, but from fear, the fear of being wrong. When you challenge their worldview, it's not just an idea under attack, it's their identity. This is why arguments spiral into chaos. This is why clarity dissolves. Because you're not debating thoughts. You're confronting defenses. And defenses don't yield to logic. They react. They deflect. They fight back. Understanding this changes everything. Because once you see the pattern, you no longer feel confused. You feel prepared. The frustration lifts. The need to prove yourself fades. And in its place, something more powerful arises: awareness. The kind that allows you to stop trying to fix the other and start understanding the dynamics at play. And that, right there, is your first step toward clarity. When logic fails to convince, we've been taught that truth has power, that reason can cut through ignorance like a blade through fog. And yet, in the presence of a fool, logic often fails. Not because the facts aren't sound, but because the soil they land on is barren. You present evidence, draw connections, cite sources, and still, nothing changes. In fact, the more precise your reasoning, the more resistance you face. Why does this happen? Because to a fool, logic is not a tool for discovery, it's a threat to identity. When someone has built their sense of self around being right, then every challenge to their belief becomes an attack. Neuroscience confirms this. When core beliefs are questioned, the brain responds as if it's under physical assault. It shuts down curiosity and activates defense. This is why the louder your logic, the stronger their denial. You're not having a conversation anymore. You're triggering a survival mechanism. And here lies a brutal truth. Rational arguments cannot penetrate emotional armor. The fool isn't trying to understand. They're trying to survive. And in this state, no amount of clarity can reach them. This is where many intelligent people stumble. They believe that if they just explain it better, speak more clearly, offer more proof, then understanding will bloom. But that moment never comes. Instead, they find themselves exhausted, frustrated, and disillusioned. The conversation becomes a battlefield. And slowly, they forget what they were fighting for in the first place. This is not a failure of intelligence. It's a misunderstanding of human psychology. When logic fails, it's not your fault. It's a sign that the conversation was never rooted in mutual curiosity. Recognizing this is liberating. It frees you from the burden of trying to rescue someone who doesn't want to be saved. It reminds you that your clarity does not need their validation. And sometimes, the wisest move isn't to argue better, it's to stop arguing at all. The hidden power of silence. In a world where noise is mistaken for knowledge and volume for value, silence has become a forgotten strength. We're conditioned to speak up, to defend our views, to never leave a challenge unanswered. But in conversations with fools, silence isn't weakness. It's strategy. When you choose not to respond, not to fight every distortion or defend every truth, you create space. And in that space, something powerful happens. You regain control. While a fool may thrive on emotional reaction, they wither in the face of calm. Their tactics rely on your engagement, your frustration, your need to correct. Take that away, and their momentum collapses. The Stoics understood this. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." True power lies not in what you say, but in what you choose not to say. Silence disarms manipulation. It lets empty rhetoric echo back upon itself. And it forces the other to fill the void with either clarity or contradiction. Either way, you win. Because silence is not absence. It's presence without surrender. It says, "I see you. I understand what you're doing. And I choose not to participate." That's not cowardice. That's mastery. Fools expect conflict. They crave the stage. They provoke, hoping to pull you into a performance where logic is drowned in drama. But when you remain still, when your silence speaks louder than their noise, you shift the entire dynamic. You remind them, and yourself, that not every opinion deserves your energy. Not every battle needs your sword. And sometimes, the most profound response to ignorance is no response at all. In the quiet, your clarity grows. In the stillness, your mind sharpens. And in that silence, you discover a power that no fool can touch. Emotional traps and mental clarity. If logic fails and silence speaks, then what remains is your ability to see clearly in the midst of emotional chaos. Because this is where fools operate best, in the realm of unchecked emotion. They provoke, not to understand, but to unbalance. And unless you learn to recognize these traps, even the most intelligent mind can be pulled into confusion. It begins subtly. A raised voice, a dismissive tone, a personal jab disguised as a joke. These are not random. They are designed to bypass your reason and trigger your defense. The moment you feel offended, the moment you feel the urge to prove, you've already lost your center. Fools thrive on reaction. The more you react, the more they control the frame. But here's the truth they never expect. You don't have to react. You can observe instead. You can notice the emotional bait and choose not to bite. This is the essence of mental clarity, not just thinking well, but thinking without interference. Emotional control is not repression. It's mastery. It's the ability to acknowledge what you feel without being driven by it. And in a conversation with a fool, it's your greatest shield. Because clarity doesn't just come from intelligence. It comes from discipline, from the choice to stay grounded when others lose themselves, from the strength to prioritize peace over pride. And when you embody that clarity, something shifts. The fool may continue their dance of distortion, but you are no longer part of the performance. You've stepped outside the frame. You're not trying to win. You're trying to stay awake. And in that awareness, you protect your most valuable asset. A mind that is not dragged into emotional whirlpools. A mind that sees patterns. A mind that remains sovereign. In a world full of noise and manipulation, this kind of clarity is more than a skill. It's a superpower. Seeds of doubt, not weapons of truth. When confronted with stubborn ignorance, our instinct is often to confront it head-on, to present the facts, to dismantle the argument, to prove the other person wrong beyond all doubt. But truth, when used as a weapon, often hardens the very resistance it seeks to dissolve. That's because no one likes to be proven wrong. The moment you say, "You're mistaken," egos flare, defenses rise, and minds close. Even if your logic is flawless, it doesn't matter. Because you've triggered a fight, not a reflection. But there is another path, one rooted not in confrontation, but in curiosity. Instead of declaring truth, you plant a seed of doubt. You don't tell them they're wrong. You ask, "Have you considered this possibility?" You don't destroy their assumptions. You invite them to question them. This is not manipulation. It's guidance. It's the subtle art of leading someone to look at their own beliefs from a new angle. And it works because it bypasses the ego. It doesn't attack, it collaborates. Socrates knew this. He didn't argue. He asked. He led his interlocutors into their own contradictions, not with force, but with gentle insistence. And often, they discovered the flaws in their thinking themselves. This is the power of a well-placed question. It creates space. It opens a door. And sometimes that's all that's needed. Because real transformation doesn't happen in moments of defeat. It happens in moments of internal realization. The seed you plant today may not sprout tomorrow, but it lingers. It grows in silence. And long after the conversation has ended, it may become the spark that ignites true change. In this way, intelligence becomes quiet, subtle, patient. It does not seek applause. It seeks understanding. And that shift from proving to planting is the mark of wisdom over mere intellect. Choosing your battles with wisdom. There comes a point in every exchange where you must ask yourself not what is true, but what is worth it. This is the wisdom that separates the brilliant from the truly wise. Because intelligence without discernment becomes exhaustion. You can spend your days correcting, explaining, defending, and still walk away empty. The world is full of people who don't want the truth, they want victory. Not clarity, but control. And when you engage them on their terms, you give them exactly what they need to keep playing. You fuel their fire. But when you walk away, when you let the conversation die, you starve the illusion. This is not surrender. It's mastery. It's the realization that not every battle is a path to growth. Some are traps. Some are designed to pull you in, to drain your energy, to confuse your purpose. Arthur Schopenhauer saw it clearly. In his work, he described how many arguments are not meant to seek truth but to win at any cost. Strawman tactics, personal attacks, endless deflections. These are not signs of engagement. They are signs of desperation. And yet, so many fall for them again and again, believing that if they just try harder, they'll break through. But you won't. Because it's not about the argument. It's about the game. And the only way to win a rigged game is to refuse to play. So the question becomes, what is worth your voice? What is worth your time, your clarity, your peace? Every moment you spend locked in a pointless struggle is a moment stolen from your purpose. Every emotional response is a gift of power to someone who never earned it. The wise know this, and that's why they seem quiet, detached, even indifferent. But they're not. They're choosing, deliberately. And that choice is where real strength lives. The fool's game and why you shouldn't play. Every fool plays a game, though most don't realize it. It's a game where facts don't matter, where winning is more important than learning, and where the goal is not truth, but dominance. The rules are simple: provoke, confuse, distract. Keep your opponent reacting. Keep them explaining. Keep them justifying. And as long as they stay in that mode, the fool feels in control. But here's what makes this game so dangerous: it's invisible to those who think they're just having a discussion. You believe you're offering clarity. They believe they're keeping you occupied. You seek understanding. They seek to win. And when those motivations clash, chaos follows. The more you try to elevate the conversation, the more they drag it down. Until eventually, you begin to sound defensive, frustrated, even irrational yourself. That's how the game consumes you. But here's the insight that frees you. The fool's game only works if you agree to play. The moment you step back, the illusion collapses. You're no longer reacting. You're observing. You're no longer defending. You're discerning. And that shift changes everything. It exposes the game for what it is: a distraction, a trap, a misuse of your mind. Because while you're busy trying to untangle someone else's delusion, you're neglecting your own clarity. You're spending energy on noise, not growth. And that cost is far greater than any argument you think you're winning. True intelligence isn't about fighting every battle. It's about recognizing when a battle is beneath you, not because you're arrogant, but because your attention is sacred. Your peace is valuable. And wasting it on someone who refuses to evolve is the slowest form of self-destruction. The fool's game is loud. It's dramatic. It's addictive. But it ends the moment you decide not to play. And that decision is the beginning of wisdom, the psychology of rigidity and ego. To understand foolishness, you must first understand what fuels it, and at its core, it is not ignorance, but fear. The fear of being wrong. The fear of losing control. The fear of having to reconstruct an identity that has been built on shaky ground. This fear creates rigidity. A closed system of thought that allows no new inputs, no contradictions, no growth. And the mind becomes a fortress not to protect truth, but to protect the ego. Because to admit being wrong is not just a shift in opinion, it is to risk collapse. That's the unspoken terror behind stubbornness. That if one belief is false, maybe others are too. Maybe the entire self-concept has to change. And change, for the fragile ego, feels like death. So it resists. It distorts. It clings. And no matter how compelling your argument is, it cannot reach them not because they don't hear it, but because their mind is defending something deeper than a point. It is defending a sense of self. This is why the most intelligent people are often the most open. They've made peace with uncertainty. They've learned that being wrong is not a threat, it's a gateway. They know that the ego must be kept in check if wisdom is to grow. But the fool hasn't learned this. Their self-worth is entangled with being right. And so, every disagreement becomes personal. Every question feels like a challenge to their value. And every correction, no matter how gentle, becomes a humiliation. Understanding this doesn't mean you excuse their behavior, but it allows you to stop personalizing it. Their resistance is not about you. It's about what they haven't yet faced within themselves. And once you see that, you can stop trying to argue them into awareness. Because awareness cannot be forced. It must be chosen. And the fool, until they are ready to choose it, will continue to resist even the gentlest truth. Outsmarting the world and then yourself. It's easy to see the fool in others. Their contradictions are loud. Their overconfidence is obvious. Their unwillingness to listen is exhausting. But the deeper challenge, the one most people avoid, is seeing the fool within. Because no matter how intelligent you are, how well-read or self-aware, you are not immune to blindness. You too have cognitive biases. You too have assumptions that go unchallenged. And you too have moments when ego speaks louder than reason. This is not a flaw. It is human. And the truly wise know this. They don't outgrow foolishness. They out-question it, relentlessly. They look in the mirror and ask, where am I being rigid? What am I defending that no longer serves me? What belief have I confused with truth? These are not easy questions. They require humility, vulnerability, the willingness to admit that you don't know as much as you think you do. And in a world obsessed with certainty, that's an act of quiet rebellion. Because the moment you begin to question yourself, not from self-doubt, but from self-inquiry, you begin to evolve. You become lighter, sharper, freer. You stop needing to prove others wrong because you are too busy refining your own clarity. And that shift changes everything. You're no longer reactive. You're reflective. You're not afraid to be wrong because being wrong is how you grow. And in that mindset, the fool's game loses its grip. Not just out there, but in here. The chaos of the world fades. The noise quiets. And your mind becomes a place of stillness, of strength, of awareness. Outsmarting the fool outside of you is a useful skill. But outsmarting the one inside, that's wisdom. That's where freedom lives. And that's how you become untouchable, not because you know everything, but because you never stop learning. The final battle, the fool within. You've learned how to spot the fool, how to resist the bait, how to remain composed while others unravel. But there is one lesson more profound than all the rest, one that most never learn. The greatest fool you will ever meet is not out there. It lives inside your own mind, and unless you confront it, nothing you've learned will hold. Because even as you avoid foolish arguments, detach from emotional chaos, and walk away from rigged games, the internal voice still lingers. The one that wants to be right. The one that fears being seen as ignorant. The one that clings to certainty even when it begins to crack. That is the final battle, not with others, but with yourself. And it's the hardest one to win, because it requires constant attention. A willingness to examine your own thinking without mercy and without shame. To say, I may be wrong, not once, but daily. To welcome being proven wrong as a sign of strength, not weakness. And to understand that the mind left unchecked will always drift towards self-protection over self-awareness. But here's the paradox: the moment you stop fighting to be right, you become clearer. The moment you stop defending old beliefs, you begin to grow. And the moment you silence the fool within, you become immune to the ones outside. This is not an endpoint. It's a discipline. A lifelong practice of humility, curiosity, and detachment. And through it, you don't just outsmart foolishness. You transcend it. You rise above the noise, not in arrogance, but in peace. The world will always have its fools. That is not your burden. Your only task is to protect your clarity, to guard your focus, to sharpen your mind like a blade that never dulls. So ask yourself, what kind of thinker do you want to be? Will you be pulled into the noise, drained by endless battles, seduced by the need to win? Or will you walk a different path, the path of wisdom, of restraint, of quiet strength? The choice is yours. And if you're ready to choose clarity over chaos, we invite you to stay on this journey with us. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and let us know in the comments what part of this truth spoke to you most deeply. Subscribe for more content that challenges your thinking, sharpens your awareness, and helps you navigate life with depth and intention. Because this isn't just about outsmarting fools. It's about becoming the kind of person who no longer needs to